Hey everybody. Oh, let me make sure I'm pointing at the right. There we go. Should have checked that before we started. But hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Weather Nerds. This is episode number 10. And we didn't have an episode last week because, we're going to get into the reason for that here in today's episode. So obviously it was a very weather-heavy week in terms of all of the headlines here across Central Texas. So I'm here with our chief meteorologist, Brady Taylor, here today to kind of walk you through everything from the past week, because even though we didn't have an episode last week, there's a lot to cover.
Yeah, very busy, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So let's go ahead and jump right on into it. So let's kind of go in chronological order, because we had at least 3 or 4 first alert weather days just in the last week alone.
3 in a row last week, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Yeah, that was kind of the craziest time frame.
Yeah, no, definitely. Especially, being in the car back-to-back days, that was fun. Yeah. So let's go all the way back to last Wednesday. April 30th was obviously last day of April, and we kind of ended the month of April with a big bang, literally and figuratively in terms of lightning. But so obviously we had some storms that rolled through that day. Me and Jake, we were out in the First Alert Weather Explorer. Brady was here in studio covering storms that day. So Brady, I'll start with you. What stood out to you about Wednesday? What do you think was...
Yeah, it was probably, the most numerous storms that we had for most of us compared to probably yesterday. But, it started off with a bang. The first storm, y'all, when chased, had a wall cloud, had the only tornado warning that we had all day in Central Texas. But, it was one of those... We missed probably the worst of anything, but it kind of fit what we expected, where it was a good coverage of storms. Again, some of that hail, some of that wind, but nothing that was extreme damage, so it was good.
Yeah, we definitely dodged a bullet that day, I think. There was that one tornado warning that was up in Hill County. I think it's actually technically 2 tornado warnings, because there was one that was on the northern side, one on the southern.
Well, it was a weird one because it was more like 2 cells kind of merged together, started the rotation, and then you nearly could see dual areas of rotation inside of it. So it's one of the most fun ones trying to look at the radar. I'm sure y'all trying to find where the rotation was, but had a decent wall cloud, it looked like, when you were out there.
Yeah, no, definitely. And it was kind of in a precarious spot because we were right there on I-35, and ask any storm chaser, they'll almost always say they hate chasing on I-35 because of all the traffic and all the buildings that are in that way too. Like, it's not a great situation if you're out on I-35 chasing a storm, because that means there's a lot of people in the path of a potentially dangerous storm. Thankfully, again, like you said, that storm kind of maintained its behavior.
Yeah.
But, and again, that was the only tornado warned storm that we had that day. But we did have one other storm that was down in closer toward Hearn, I believe, or down toward Kasi. And that one didn't get a tornado warning, but it was one that we were kind of watching, at least briefly, because it was showing some, very weak, broad rotation. And the picture I'm going to show y'all here is actually a picture I took while I was out with Jake Ward in our First Alert Weather Explorer. And you can kind of see the little bit of a lowering that we had there. It was just very broad, wasn't very tight. And so I don't remember. Did the severe thunderstorm warning on that one have a tornado possible tag?
I don't think it did. Okay. To me, they all start running together, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But I think once we told them, you were there, and we had another storm spotter there around the Cost area. We get great coverage in the Limestone County area. We get they cover outside of their county some too. So we kind of had both of y'all seeing it, saying, hey, there wasn't anything significant rotation. So I think they were just watching that. It also gets hard when you get in our east and southeastern counties. We get into kind of a radar area out there that's hard to see real great. That's kind of the reason we added the one in College Station. But I don't think that one did, but it kind of showed that signs that those storms were still packing a little punch.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And like you said, it's kind of a little of a radar hole out there. So it's times like that the observations become really, really important. That was basically the extent of the stormy fun across Central Texas this past Wednesday. Again, we did have some areas that got some hail, I think. Yeah. Some winds.
Yeah, and like I said, it was just more, we kind of knew it was a little more manageable. We expected it to be the best coverage, but really when we were talking fuel for storms, Thursday kind of beat out, and then Friday was another day to keep an eye on. But that Wednesday was kind of, all right, we're getting going, kind of the start of everything as that system was moving in.
Yeah, definitely. And of course, that was the first of the 3 first alert weather days that we had last week. So obviously we were very busy. And of course, that was last Wednesday when we would have typically had our 10th episode of Weather Nerds, but unfortunately it got delayed to this week because of obvious reasons. But one really cool thing I want to show you all after the storms on this past Wednesday, we had some really cool viewer photos, and Brady and I also went out to go view this. Yeah, really, really cool. And you see these typically this time of year because, you usually see them on the backside of storms with all the buoyancy and all the, unstableness, if that's even a word. But again, this year, these are called mammatus clouds. We had a lot of viewers kind of submit these photos, and this photo was actually from me. Brady was actually live on his Facebook page to talk about these.
Stepped outside. We were kind of past the worst of it, so like, hey, we need to nerd out just a little bit. And me, I think that was the first time I stepped outside since before lunchtime. So sometimes I have to make sure there's actually weather outside, not just a green screen I'm pointing at.
Yeah, no, it was nice to step outside the studio. And actually, that photo you see there was actually taken outside at our studio. You can kind of see it there in the foreground. We got some other photos here to show you too. A little bit more of a direct overhead view there. But yeah, there were some pretty neat looking clouds. A lot of viewers submitted us some photos, wondering kind of what they were. And like I said, you kind of see these on the backside of storms after they've kind of rolled through. It's just kind of a sign of how unstable the atmosphere was as that storm rolled through. So yeah, that was a pretty cool end to what was otherwise a very stormy day across the area. So. And
then Thursday, that was the interesting day. It's one of those days where it was like, we knew the coverage wasn't going to be much, but we were waiting for a bomb to go off, and yeah, we definitely had one there around Copper's Cove.
Yeah, so going ahead and looking at Thursday, definitely was an interesting day. We had, unfortunately, I don't have any viewer photos. I didn't have time to get all that together, but, of the hail anyway. But we had some pretty big hail out in the Copper's Cove area.
We had upwards of nearly, at least in one location, grapefruit size hail. Now, a lot of times when those style storms do, you'll get somebody that gets the monster hail, and then it's I had some people say it was hailing for nearly 45 minutes.
Yeah, wow.
So mainly small hail, but that storm was just sitting still right over Copper's Cove. But yeah, we had some roofs that ran into some issues with that. Yeah, anywhere from tennis ball to grapefruit size, at least in some isolated areas there around Copper's Cove.
Yeah, definitely. Those storms were kind of just riding a little bit of a boundary that was sitting there. They were very slow moving. And the interesting thing about that day is, according to the Storm Prediction Center, and according to us too, we weren't really expecting much out of, other than hail anyways, out of these storms. The tornadic threat was expected to be pretty much zero. And it was for just about every single storm except for one. Yeah. And it was, and you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but it was a little bit of an atmospheric dynamics accident, so to speak.
It was nearly, so it kind of started as two small storms.
Yeah.
Then they acted like they wanted to merge, but then as you watched it was like they bounced off of each other. And sometimes, if the atmosphere is set up right where you don't have a lot of wind to deal with, sometimes storms will split. And that right moving storm a lot of times will be the ones that can be tornadic. Well, this really wasn't your typical supercell that split. It was more like bumped into each other and then went. And with that right moving one, as slow as it was moving, yeah, it did produce looking like a pretty decent tornado over very rural areas just on and just south of the Burnett County line there with Lampasas. That storm, I would say, was probably moving 5 miles an hour or less. I mean, it was as slow as I've ever seen a tornado move. There's very rare times where you can just sit still and watch a tornado for that long. It was hard to see at times. It was wrapped in rain, but we did have some people out there that gave us visual proof of the tornado.
I would say we have some photos here I was going to show you. These were some viewer photos that were submitted to us from Burnett County. And you can see the tornado there kind of right behind that big pole, that big transmitter right there. So, yeah, that was a photo that was submitted to us. We also had some pretty good viewer video that I want to show you here. I believe this was submitted from Nick Van, also out in Burnett County.
On the ground right there in front
but, yeah, you can see it way out. It was a pretty decent-sized tornado, too.
Yeah, and
I'm not sure which way it's
stopping
going.
and taking videos on something like that. If you're driving towards what looks to be a tornado,
on the ground.
stop and make sure you know where it's going. I'm sure it's caught a lot of people's attention, but I mean, fortunately, that one was very slow moving. We can get tornadoes that are moving 60, 70 miles per hour at times.
Right outside.
If you see something like that, pull over, stop, kind of figure out what's going on. Don't just keep driving and say, oh, hey, that looks like a tornado.
But, yeah.
But luckily, like I said, it set still. Then it spun up another warning further south down around the Briggs community in Burnett County. But that was the only tornadic storm. It was two storms we watched, that one in Copper's Cove and then another one near Hearn. Hearn was more of a rainmaker and hail producer. Hearn's got a bunch of rain in the last week, and less than just here in the first few days of the month of May. But, yeah, that was a rare – I wasn't here in 1997. Were you even born in 1996?
I was not.
Oh.
I was,
So I was in
3 years pre me.
Yeah. So the only storm I can think of, rare do you ever see south moving storms. You know, the Gerald tornado is the most famous one, and it was very slow moving. It was only like 10 miles an hour moving south. This one nowhere near that strong, but even though it wasn't that strong, it did chew up and do, you know, when you sit, 100 and plus mile per hour winds spinning at one spot for a while, it's going to chew up and do some damage. But luckily over pretty rural areas, I think there was one minor injury from it. But I mean, like I said, it was a very rural area, didn't do any major damage for a lot of people. And yeah, it was just, a few miles. I mean, it was, when it started, it was like 3 or 4 miles south of Kempner. But it just slowly kind of drifted down to the south. Yeah,
and it was one of those, like you said, very slow moving. I know you mentioned 1997, the Gerald tornado. That one was another very slow moving one. And when these kinds of storms get into areas such as, Gerald, where it's a little bit more populated, they can do some pretty decent damage. I mean, Gerald was rated an F5.
Yeah. Last F5 ever to hit in the state of Texas.
Yeah.
It's been that long.
And seriously. Well, and I was going to say, I remember I heard this recently. I don't think I realized how powerful this storm was, but because it was kind of sitting over the Gerald tornado, that is, since it was kind of moving over very slowly over the same areas, it did so much damage to the point that it ripped concrete off the ground. It's not every day you hear a tornado do that.
If you go out on the western side of Gerald, you can still, if you know where you're looking, still see the path of that storm. So yeah, that one, I always tell people if that would have hit in a major metropolitan area, it'd probably be the strongest one we've ever seen. It was just insane the damage that one did. Yeah, fortunately nothing like that. Like I said, more manageable, but yeah, it was just a rare kind of slow-moving storm that we had a lot of time to sit and watch it, but luckily it wasn't a major destructive kind of a system. A lot due to where it was located, and also just not crazy strong. But yeah, every once in a while, that's why you'll see us say the tornado threat is not zero. On those days where Mother Nature can spin stuff up, like I said, we get a boundary that can do something weird, or like I said, 2 storms colliding and causing a little weird spin. And that kind of also led into Friday, where we're like, man, we got so many boundaries left over. Who knows what's going on out
there. Yeah, no, exactly. And Thursday was just kind of that weird setup, like you said, because we didn't have any widespread forcing by any means.
Goodness.
I mean, we just had,
There's so much fuel.
Yeah.
That'd been bad.
Yeah. And another little interesting tidbit I want to share with the viewers, too. I know you mentioned, like, while we were out in Burnett County, it was not really a good time to be out there on 183 with that tornado there. Like you said, caught a lot of people's attention. And fingers crossed you never find yourself in a situation like that. But if you do, I do want to give you a little bit of storm chaser advice, if you want to call it that. But if you're ever looking at a tornado, you want to watch the edges of it, not necessarily the center of it. If you're watching the center of it, it's going to be hard for you to tell what kind of direction it's moving. Obviously, with this one, it was very slow moving. It was practically parked over the same spot for a little while. So it may have been a little bit harder to determine this with how slow it was moving. But especially with a faster moving one, if you see it moving left to right or right to left, that means the storm is not coming to you. But if you're staring at a tornado and it appears to not be moving, that means either you should move or take shelter.
Yeah.
Because that means you're right there in the path, essentially.
And one other tricky thing in Central Texas for people that think they can just jump out and look at a storm, a lot of times we get the joy of the rain-wrapped, high precipitation storms, kind of like we had yesterday.
Yep.
Where if there's a tornado, odds are you're not going to see it, or it's going to be wrapped in rain. And so, yeah, we try not to advise going out. That one was one of the few, and it even got wrapped in rain at times. But, it's tornado chasing in this area is sometimes not the best.
No, especially, I mean, we're really close to the Gulf. We almost always have so much humidity, so much moisture. It's not like Oklahoma where you're going to get, like, low precipitation supercells almost all the time.
Yeah.
So it makes it a little bit hard, and which we'll get to tomorrow here in just a moment. But before we get to, or not tomorrow, sorry, yesterday. But before we get to yesterday's storms, let's talk about Friday. We had a little bit more increased coverage with the storms this past Friday. We had, Brad and I, we were the ones that were out driving that day. We actually got caught in that hailstorm near the Waco Regional Airport. We had probably penny to quarter size, I think, at times.
Yeah, the radar was showing bigger hail, but after the fact, when it was all done, it was mainly just a ton of small hail. I live on the northern side of Waco, and by the time I got home, my live oak trees, they're fine, but my sidewalk was just covered in little pieces of it where I know folks that, like, people say that they got a garden or something or plants that just, probably ruined some of them. But yeah, dumped high winds that y'all saw, and a lot of that small to moderate size, not the destructive hail like we had in the Coppers Cove area. Enough hail that I have had some roofer companies already come and knocking on the door, making sure you want to check your roof. No, I'm good. But yeah, it was definitely, and that was right at school letting out time as it was rolling along I-35, and yeah, we were wall to wall with that one for a while.
Yeah, and I would say if you were watching here on Facebook, our live stream, I think we were live on YouTube too, I believe, or just on KWTX in general. If you were watching our stream, you would have seen Brad and I. We ran into a lot of flooding too. That was a big issue, and it was partially because we were kind of going through the more populated areas. We were trying to stay out ahead of the storm, and then by the time we got to the Waco regional area, the gust front essentially caught up with us, and that's where we ran into just about everything.
Yeah, and that's one of the joys of storm chasing. It's, you got to deal with the town you're in, trying to get to and get around, and you mentioned the metropolitan areas. Those, you think flooding. We had the high water rescue that was out near Riesel. The unfortunate in the Brenham, the little girl that got swept away. That was more in town, but the metropolitan areas, really where its newer subdivisions have been built, it's areas that the ground used to absorb all the rain. Now you're adding concrete, asphalt, and stuff, so water flows, and yeah, you just kind of get those. That's why we call it flash flooding. It's that fast, just water rises real quick and can cause issues.
Yeah, definitely. When I was going to say, that's kind of been an issue just all week with these storms. We've had so much rain that rivers have started overflowing, and we'll get to that in just a moment. But I do want to share, this is a pretty funny photo that was actually submitted to us, or commented on our Facebook page, rather, from Melissa Stanford. This is a photo of our Weather Explorer when we were driving out in China Spring, right before we got caught up on all the fun. And yeah, if you ever see us out and about on a stormy day, just know you're probably not in the best spot, because we're probably looking at the worst of it.
Or into a school visit.
Either that or it's a school visit. If you see us out and it's sunny and warm, there's no reason to worry. But yeah, so I thought that was pretty funny. I thought I'd share that. But let's go ahead and go talk about yesterday's thunderstorms as well. It was a pretty similar thing where we had a little bit more widespread coverage, but we had that one little isolated storm down in our southern counties. It was actually a little bit earlier in the day with the setup that we had yesterday. Earlier in the morning, we had a tornado warning that was just to the west of I-35, I believe, around the 7-8 a.m. time frame. And then that storm basically just pushed its way all the way through those southern counties, through Bell County, all the way up into Cameron and Hearn. And this is another photo I want to show you all. This is actually a hail photo that I took yesterday out in Rogers. So this was actually not, believe it or not from that tornado warned storm. This is actually a storm that popped up right out and ahead of that storm, and as it kind of blew up, it just dropped its hail core right on top of us in Rogers. And you see, it was not necessarily huge, but it was decent in size, enough to where it was enough to warrant that severe thunderstorm warning. Definitely nickel to quarter size hail right there. You can see it kind of melted a little bit in my hand, so it probably wasn't as big as it was when I picked it up.
Yeah, and like I said, the wind was the big story for a lot of those. Heavy rain was a big story. There's a decent chance, at least maybe a couple tornadoes touch down. The National Weather Service, probably as we're recording this right now, are on their way into Milam, Robertson, Leon County to look at the. Luckily, didn't hit any major buildings, homes, but a lot of outbuildings, barns, sheds, some of that stuff. You get that stuff that's sheet metal. Sheet metal can catch wind so easy, or stuff like that. So we'll see what if they were tornadoes. I would think nothing more than probably an EF1.
Yeah, it didn't seem anything super organized. Even on radar, the rotation wasn't super tight. But
yeah, it's not your typical supercell that's just out there by itself, more of just a nasty line in little areas where little spotty circulations got to develop.
Yeah. When I was going to say yesterday, the fog was a big issue too. We were battling that almost all the way down. We got down to Temple, and then we took a left or a right to go east off of I-35 down US 77, and it was foggy the whole way down there. It made it hard to see anything.
A tornado warning with a thick fog.
Yeah, that was not fun. A little bit of a high stress situation there, but yeah, thankfully, from what we've heard anyway, it doesn't sound like there's been any major damage. Well, I will say, whenever we were driving through there yesterday with that second tornado warning near Cameron, we kind of came in behind the storm, And as we were behind it, obviously it was raining really hard, so it made it hard to see anything. But since we were coming in behind it, we were kind of looking around to see if there was any damage. And I will say there were some like tree limbs and stuff that were kind of scattered everywhere. But with things like that, it's hard to tell if it was already like that or if that was fresh, that kind of thing. So obviously, like you said, National Weather Service, they're going to go out and do their surveys. So all we can really do at this point is speculate until we get the official word. Yeah. But so yeah, definitely a fun week of storms. That's about everything that we've dealt with for the last week or so. And I believe, and I want to make sure I didn't skip this photo because it's a pretty good photo too, but I believe this was from last week, so not yesterday's storms. This would have been I think this was Friday, actually, when we had that long line roll through. But this is kind of what we were dealing with. This is some viewer video. I believe it was sent from Limestone County, I believe. But you can see the large shelf cloud there. And it was a pretty decent structure. And that was that same storm that kind of dropped out all that hail on us in the Waco regional area. So
yeah, that, like I said, that I think in Waco regional it was 48, or it was close to, it was over 50 mile per hour winds there. But yeah, that shelf cloud, kind of good news, bad news. It's an indication of that strong wind pushing in. But the good news, if it's a day where you're like, I don't know if there's going to be tornadoes or not, that shelf cloud's a good thing because you're like, oh, here comes that straight line winds. That'll knock out any threat of any tornadic activity, so that's good news. But yeah, I think the hail was some of a story for some, the tornadic threat there for some. The rain, really our southeastern counties, that's where if we get any more rain here in a while, it's going to cause some big issues, particularly Hearn, Bryan College Station, and then again just a scary story with the little girl in Brenham, we preach, and I think everybody knows the turnaround, don't drown, but with that little girl, getting dropped off at the bus stop and then walking, and her sibling made it through fine. It's just one of those reminder to tell your kids. I mean, even if you're playing outside and there's a little creek near your house or even a drainage ditch or something like that, you don't know how fast it's moving, and all it takes is once you get swept off your feet, I mean, you can hit your head or you can't grab onto anything because you're in rushing water. And, praying for that family. But yeah, it's one of those, unfortunate examples to remind your kids, hey, one, if it's thundering outside, come inside. That's Mother Nature's way to tell you, hey, you're about to get struck by lightning. But then two, if you're out anywhere where you see rushing water, it may not even be moving that fast. We've had roadways get swept out. You don't even know it's not there, and people drive. It's always better to be late somewhere and let the water recede than being in a hurry to get across.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so that we don't talk about flooding as much, but on a given year, more people die from flooding than all other types of severe weather combined. So that flash flooding threat is real.
Yeah, definitely. When I was to say, you can even see the evidence here with these rainfall totals. Brady, I believe you put these numbers together last night.
They're not 100% official. I tried to scrounge together getting the data, so they may be off a few tenths of an inch because I was getting data last night. But yeah, check out Hearn. 9.17 inches. Hearn, Bryan College Station, I think, broke 2 records already. One day they had 4 inches. They had morning storms and they had some afternoon storms. Wow. And then yesterday was 2.25 inches. So, because if you look like, Cameron only 2, and Hearn, Mahé only 2 inches, but 2 inches in 6-7 days, that's a pretty good rain. And when you start talking, the 8 to 9 inches, and if you've ever been down Hearn, Bryan College Station, it's very flat down in that area, very low lying, just farmland, and they also have to deal with all the water that's coming down the rivers heading into that area as well. So you got the Brazos, you got the Little River, you got the Leon River, some of that stuff that the waters are going to stay higher there than we're dumping more water into those heading down. Luckily, none of the lakes, I think, are overfilled. Lake Limestone may be dumping some, but Lake Waco, Belton, Stillhouse, and all those still got a little room to take on a little water, so that's good.
Yeah, that's definitely good. Well, and it's a good thing, too, because with all this rain anyway, especially by the time we head into summer and the faucet turns off, it'll be nice to have at least a little bit of a surplus in case we stay dry for a little while.
Except the mosquitoes are going to be as big as a horse. It hadn't been bad mosquito weather, and it's been cool. Gordon and I were joking about on the news last night. Yeah, it's 90s returning next week. You better go find any standing water that's, all it takes is like a soda cap size. That's all it takes to breed a mosquito. And this weekend go find anywhere that may be a little water standing because, they're going to be out in full force.
Oh, yeah. We're going to get that early taste of summer next week. That'll be fun.
Yeah.
I guess we can go ahead and start wrapping up here. I'm realizing we're going a little over time. But So we can go ahead and talk about the forecast a little bit for next week. Again, we'll just kind of walk you through the weather planner a little bit. Obviously, we've been talking this whole episode about how busy we've been in the weather department the last week. We're finally getting a little bit of a break. We'll see some scattered rain chances from the time of this recording today, this Wednesday, all the way through likely the beginning of the weekend as we head toward Mother's Day. But like we said, we were talking about next week, could be talking low to mid 90s, a little bit of that early taste of summer, lots of sunshine
really,
too.
when you get to the end there and you start seeing the morning lows around 70. Now I'm sure there's people fans. Hey, let's get the sunshine and enjoy it. You don't want to stop the faucet too early because sometime in May, early June, it's going to shut off and it may not turn back on until the fall. So we want to at least keep the scattered showers and thunderstorms. Yes, we root against any severe weather, but like I said, we're still. I mean, for most Central Texas, kind of right about where we should be year to date on rain. So it's helped, but you want a surplus going into the summer if you can.
For sure. Okay, well, before we wrap it up here, Brady, do you have anything going on, Degrees of Science-wise, interview-wise, that's coming out you want to tease?
So we didn't have one this week. Next week, what is it? Talking about space weather, like the impacts of space weather. We've got a really cool interview I'm actually doing tomorrow with Cameron Park Zoo. We're talking about, they've got a cool project they're doing with cardiology with their orangutans and apes and stuff. So we're doing that. And that episode, when it airs in a couple weeks, will be the 100th Degrees of Science that we've done. As crazy as that is. So, a lot going on. Check that out. Then, just the normal running around like crazy like we always are.
Yeah, there you go. Well, if you want to check out those Degrees of Science interviews as well as find our full recordings of the Weather Nerds episodes, you can go to the Degrees of Science YouTube channel, which I'm going to pop up here. You can see this is actually just a screen recording that I took with my phone, but you can see all the videos there with Brady's interviews on Degrees of Science as well as our episodes of Weather Nerds. But if you want to find like a more confined playlist of all of that, you can actually hit those tabs there. Obviously, if you hit videos, you'll see all the most recent stuff that we've been putting out. But if you go to the podcast tab, you'll be able to see the playlist of Weather Nerds. That's where you can find all of our previous episodes of things that we've covered in the past here, just weather in Central Texas wise. We also sometimes branch out a little bit nationally as well. And of course, if you want to watch the Degrees of Science interviews, you can check those out there as well. So again, thank you all for tuning in. This has been the 10th episode of Weather Nerds. Thank you for joining in live on Facebook if you're watching live. Thank you again for tuning in if you're watching on YouTube, if you're watching there. And we hope to, fingers crossed, with the quiet forecast next week, see you again next week. Have a great week.